Hello, Global Theater. My name is Gerry Fialka. Today's November 2025. Want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast, I'm Probably Wrong About Everything. Also want to thank Carolyn Casey for introducing me to today's guest, Sara Jolina Wolcott. Where are you calling from, Sara?
I live in the traditional homelands of the Mohican people in the Hudson Valley in upstate New York.
How cool is that? The first question is, what is the best thing for a human being?
What is the best thing for a human being? Ah, love.
Yeah, it's the answer I get the most. I really appreciate that. I agree. What is your favorite form of information? How it comes into you?
My favorite form of information. I'm a really kinesthetic learner. I learn through experience and through touch and through physical engagement. And that can include with sound and music as well, right? Because
Yeah,
sound is a form of touch. The vibrations in sound is also a vibration in touch. Like touch and sound are kind of they're on a spectrum, right, of vibration. So I like that. And having said that, there are absolutely times when I think because I'm so sensitive to both touch and sound, that often reading is best, right? Often I really like reading things. I think it's in part because I'm quite sensitive, so it can be really helpful. So sometimes sitting down with a book can be one of the most calming things for me. I think, especially at the end of a busy day, like just sitting down with a good book can be really helpful.
I agree. Did you become a reader, one, because your parents told you to, two, they did it as an example, or three, on your own?
I would probably say all of the above.
Yeah,
I when I'm at my own home now, but I spend a fair amount of time in my family home, and I often teach and do lectures from there. And often I choose as my backdrop the bookshelves with lots of books on them that my father built. Like as a child, there were these three, they're like ceiling to floor bookshelves, and he was a teacher himself, but he was also a really good woodworker, and he made beautiful furniture, including these bookshelves. And so I think I watched my parents read. I watched them work with, I watched my father work with his hands. I watched my mother work with her hands in many different ways. And I reread as a family, and reading for me was both a form of escape and pleasure growing
yeah,
up, and it was really encouraged. And
yeah.
ironically, I read a lot of fiction and science fiction and fantasy growing up. I thought I was going to be a science fiction writer. That was my assumption for my life. And the irony is that my father kept trying to like push like his histories on me, like historical fiction. And I like never, I was like, like whatever. I read like one or two historical books as a kid. I had almost no interest in it. And then ironically now, like I write about history and talk about history and read historical fiction all the time.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I think it did get to me. It just took a couple decades.
well, you really painted a beautiful picture there of with words. So, why do you think humans collect or gather information?
I Well, it's so interesting. Do we gather and collect information, or do we need to have ways of engaging with all the information that is coming to us all the time, right? Like as human beings walking and wandering through this earth, collectively, individually, we are just surrounded and bombarded with information, like the wind, the air, like the birds, everything that's happening around us. How are we going to eat? How are we going to drink? Like survival questions. Like we are bombarded with information. We need information. We have to have information to survive. And then I think actually what's interesting is like, how do we categorize the information that we have, and how do we decide what information we want to engage in, or we want to prioritize, right? So like the when I do my circular time work with people, which is something I'm kind of doing starting like at this season, because we start with a reflective exercise on the year. One of the questions that's most helpful for people is like after they do their sort of initial what happened in this year, I always ask people, okay, so what categories arise for you?
Yeah.
And realize usually people go through a process of realizing that the culture has given them default categories:
Yeah.
work, play, family, and those categories are often insufficient for their actual lives and for what they actually care about. And people don't realize, like, we have the power to actually change our categories.
Yeah.
um, and that if you change your category, you change how you receive and how you promote and give information.
So well put. Two things you evoked there was Igor Stravinsky said most people don't know what they like what they know. And
Yeah,
so
absolutely. Right.
it's
Right.
exactly what I do in this series is it's me and you versus the wording on the questions. So I'm all for people changing the verbs or the nouns in my questions, and you don't have to answer the questions. I'm for stories, anecdotes, tangents, and it's really just prompts. And so for you saying, well, I don't know if we gather or collect information, that was a beautiful approach because there
Mm.
was something else. Do you think this need or want to collect information is more innate or more invented?
Well, as is, I think we, information comes at us, just because we exist. And it comes at all animals, right? All animals have a lot of information coming at them all the time, and we categorize it. Um, and I do think in our current age, there is a level to which we treat information as a source of security. Like the more you know, the more safe you are, right? And there's sometimes that's true. Like sometimes that's true. Like I think we should not assume that that's not true.
Yeah.
Sometimes that is true. And we associate knowledge with power. Um, so the person who knows more often seems to thinks they have more power in the room, and often sometimes that's true. Sometimes that's true. Um, so I think that we have both invented it, and it's something that we need. Like we need
Yeah.
information to make
Yeah.
decisions and to live our life, right? And like I think often some of the more interesting questions or things that shape people's lives is like, how does information and knowledge, which I'm sure you understand as separate things, but how do we what are the power dynamics of that, and how do we engage with that, like
Yeah.
as people?
Really good. And it's you evoked the question, how do we unlearn? Because everybody's smarty pants, they think they know everything. And then it's like the real smart people go, no, I'm trying to unlearn everything I don't, or reinvent it, transform it. Do do
Right.
thoughts do thoughts create emotions?
Yes and no. I think there's many ways that thoughts and emotions can arise. Um, so I think there's different levels of unlearning, and so like when you actually said that, I actually thought of some people who endless like I talk about unlearning a lot, and I'm in the communities that talk about unlearning a lot and the importance of unlearning. And sometimes it's also like, oh, it can get so annoying. All these people talking about unlearning, and
Right.
but we don't want it to get to such an extent that people aren't taking responsibility for their actions. It's like, oh, I don't know. And it's like, God, come on now. Like you're an adult. Like I don't how long have you been alive, right? Like
Really great
so
observation there.
like
That was
sometimes
beautiful.
the unlearning gets a little bit too much and people
Yeah.
abdicate responsibility, and they abdicate, like, where they are in the system. But you know and then there's different levels of unlearning. I think one of the most important forms of unlearning, which is the same for learning, um, I think with unlearning there's a sense of you're untangling yourself from something that was false.
Yeah.
Hope hopefully that's what we in the remembering course I teach. That's a lot of what people are doing. We're untangling from false histories and false identities of who we are as humans and as
Yeah.
ourselves and our country, et cetera, et cetera. But um if you only do that at the level of the intellect and you don't do that at the level of the body and the spirit, then you've only gone so far.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've encountered this. Like there's a story. Parker Palmer actually tells a story of like but there's many versions of the story of a time when a group of people didn't know what to do. They don't know what to do. They don't know what to do. And they get more and more information. And eventually they get enough of the right information that the way forward becomes clear and everyone automatically wants to do the same thing because it's just really clear. It's just like really, really clear what to do. And like what happens when you're really clear what to do is you don't even necessarily need to say what it is, you just do it. Like it
Yeah.
shifts from like it just becomes embodied action. You just do the right thing,
Yeah.
right? And I feel like that form of knowing, that knowing is not just intellectual knowing, knowing is also what you do and how you're living your life. It's like what is it? How are you living your life in a beautiful way, right? And like
Yeah.
that's coming from your knowing. That's coming from your wisdom. That's coming from your experience.
Yeah.
This and that's everything from what you eat for breakfast to, how you treat your kids to what does it mean to, you know, to affect certain advocacy work, right? It has all levels.
Yeah. You're articulate and concise. I really appreciate it. I'm learning a lot. It's like every week when I listen to Carolyn Casey, I want to write down every line and go, man, I've got to use this line, embodied
She
action.
has so
It's,
many great lines. She has
yeah.
so
Well,
many great lines.
you just resonated with a lot of what she says, and on your own, put it in your own words. So I appreciate that. This next one is fill in the blank, Sarah. I don't know what I think until I,
um, I would like the first thing that comes to mind is I don't know what I think until I'm engaging with it,
yeah,
right? And that's part of that for me, that kind of experiential learning. Sometimes I have to say it drives my partner crazy because
yeah,
like she can actually, I mean, like we both have really rich powers of the imagination, but she can actually imagine what the thing is and like she can do a little bit more of the like imagine something, decide whether or not she likes it before I do. Like I tend to need to like taste it or experience it, and she can like look, and she's much more I think her imagination's a bit better than mine in some ways. um yeah, that's the first thing that comes to mind. And it's ironic because I do so much writing and talking and all this intellectual stuff, but it comes from the doing, and it's
yeah,
intersecting with doing. And that
yeah,
includes the emotions, right? Like by doing or experiencing, I also mean feeling, right? Until I
yeah.
feel it, I don't always know it. Emotionally feel it, I don't always get it.
It's good because McLuhan says, I don't know what I think until I say it. Joan Didion says, I don't know what I think until I write it. Sarah, can
Yeah,
he?
I get that.
Yeah,
I get that too, right?
yeah,
And or as a singer, I get that too. Like I don't always, it's not always there. And then sometimes I write stuff and I look at them like, is that true?
yeah,
Which is an interesting experience, right?
yeah,
Um, and then I had to like reassess because sometimes when I'm writing and talking, I'm just filling in like I'm putting an approximate word in place
yeah,
to fill in an experience. And then I had to think about that word a little bit. Is that word actually going to convey what I'm trying to convey here? And then I had to like question my experience. But it's useful. I mean, it's interesting. I like questioning things.
yeah. It's like this woman a couple weeks ago. She goes, I don't know what I think until I rant about it for 30 minutes. And that is like, you're getting it out of your system. And then
Yeah. You're working through something.
yeah,
Like most of my clients who I work with, I I assume they have to talk about something for 15, like they talk about something and then I ask them more questions and then they talk about it some more. And it's usually only in the second or third round of questions that they understand what they really think or believe,
yeah,
what they want.
that's
We
it.
don't understand it the first rush.
Yeah,
Like why would we? Why would
yeah.
we?
My mom, when I asked her, can I interview you? She says, everything I say today, I might say differently tomorrow. Says, that's okay. Because
That's okay.
I'm not
That's a
trying to
very
nail
great.
people to these, like, oh, you answered it this way. I'm just saying this is just airing ideas. Can
Yeah.
humans can humans think without language?
Oh, what a beautiful question. I used to say a long time ago, because I suck at learning languages, like I'm really bad at it. I used to say that my first language was the language of touch.
Yeah,
And one of my favorite, I'm a minister and I'm a religious professional in various ways, um, in a very unconventional way. But so one of my favorite um, I guess anthropologies of religion folks is Tom Driver, who writes a book on ritual, and he writes that ritual is humans' oldest language.
yeah,
And might have and because animals have rituals, like, right? So animals have rituals. And so like the way a cat wakes up in the morning and like eats their food, but the cat will almost always do the same thing every single morning. They'll
yeah,
touch the same part of the room. They go in the same direction. They're doing a very ritualistic action.
yeah.
Um, will tell their humans the same thing. So, and cats, so far as their language is not the same as human language, which is not to say they don't have language or not to say they don't communicate, but it's very different than the human language, so far as we know. And so it's like I look at what a cat does and I look at what a human does, and it's like there is something, there is some thought pattern that is going on with the cat, and some thought pattern and the human can communicate with the cat. Now, if you're communicating with an animal that's not a non-human animal, because humans are animals, if you're communicating with a non-human animal, is that form of communication a language? Well, kinda,
Yeah.
sure, right? So then are you thinking in a human language like English, or are you thinking in an animal language, which is like probably a little bit of both human and
Yeah.
non-human? And I find that like a really interesting play space, right? Like a really like where's the language that humans share with other animals? Like, humans and wild animals can absolutely communicate through all sorts of verbal and nonverbal and body ways. And so like there's ways in which humans and non-humans can speak together. Um, and and maybe that says something about language, but I think it also says something about thinking.
It's a
And
lot.
what is
And
the nature of thought?
the word ritual, I can't wait to look up that whole etymology on it, because ritual is a human's oldest language. Is amazing thing for me to research, because I often go, oh, someone says my pet loves me. I goes, what do you talk? That's anthropomorphizing our word on them.
Yeah,
And you're getting eye
right.
contact with them, and you're saying that eye contact is evoking the word love. But I wanted to tell you, because you've stressed this tactility and touch thing, my favorite filmmaker in the world, Craig Baldwin, I says, what's your favorite form of information? He said, human touch. Now, most
Mm,
people don't think human touch is a form of information. And Ann Magnuson, I says, what's your favorite form of information? She said, a hug. And they don't
yeah.
really, you're emphasizing this, that has come up in the past, that touch is a form of information. But Chomsky says, yeah, Chomsky says language is not just words. It's a
Mhm.
culture, a
Right.
tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. Sarah, what do you do when language doesn't work? When language breaks
Mhm.
down, what do you do?
Right. Right. I mean, that's one of the big questions, isn't it? What do we do when language doesn't work? And there's so many times in which that question arises for us, right?
Yeah,
It can be when the meaning of the word, a particular word, is not shared. And love is a great example, or trust, or respect.
yeah,
What respect means to one person is not necessarily, in fact, guaranteed, not what respect means to somebody else. And
yeah,
both people value respect, but it looks completely different. The value is expressed by very different sets of actions. My
yeah,
father is very much a patriot. He passed 10 years ago. And His form of he was also very much environmentalist. I come from a very long family of environmentalists, and his form of patriotism included arguing with the government about environmental issues and protesting, and he saw protesting to save the environment as one of the highest forms of patriotism he could have, because
Yeah.
it was standing for the land that he loved, and it was exercising his right as a citizen. And I have certainly known many people who feel that to be patriotic is to not question the government or to just do whatever the people in charge say. That's patriotism, right? So there's very, very different ideas of what these words, individual words, mean. And I think we often, don't recognize that people mean different things. And so then we talk cross purposes and we can't hear each other. And
Yeah.
we don't know what the other person has said. And sometimes we do recognize, oh, they mean a very different thing by these words than I mean. Then there's times when we mean the same thing, like someone experiences harm. We mean the same thing by the harm, but we have very different experiences of what actually happened. Well,
Yeah.
was that a harm or was that not a harm? Or was that a joke or was that not a joke? This happens all the time. People make a joke and I think it's funny and someone doesn't think it's funny and it's like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Right? Like my mom used to say, and I really think she was right on this one, that it's a miracle that humans can actually communicate with each other at all, ever.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
given what's in the way between this ear and my heart and your heart and my
Yeah.
head and your head. And we have to work with the head, the heart, and the ear, like the literal ear. People also physically misunderstand each other all the time. Right. So language, I think, fails us on the regular. On the regular,
Yeah.
language fails us. And we keep coming back to it because we yearn for understanding and we yearn to understand and to be understood. We yearn for both. We keep being stubborn and insisting upon trying. And I think again that's where again the language, other forms of languages, touch, music, sitting in silence with each other, can like go. There's been times when I know I can't communicate with someone. I know my capacity to communicate with people isn't very good because I don't know what the words to say. If someone's in deep grief or deep loss or deep anger, we don't always know what to say to each other in those
Yeah.
very like vulnerable spaces. And sometimes all we can do is just physically be in the same space and just be together. Like, I don't know what to say, but I'm going to physically be here. And my presence, I'm going to trust that my presence and the power of my heart is strong enough that it means something to you.
Yeah.
And you might never be able to tell me what it means. And I might never be able to tell you what it means. We might never have words. And anything, as someone who does a lot of work with spiritual things, like they say I'm trained as a theologian, and they say that, in theology is you can never F the inevitable. You can never succeed as a theologian in describing God. It's
Yeah.
impossible because God is beyond description. God is beyond human description. And so that's why and I really appreciate how my Muslim friends will talk, what they say, like you cannot draw or write the name of God ever on some, you can never draw an image of God because, well, for one thing, it's always going to be less than it actually is.
Yeah. Wow. Really heavy stuff because two things. McLuhan has a great line. Communication of the new is a miracle, but it's not impossible. And he was a jokester, but it's basically an amazing thing that Pascal said. All the problems of the world could be solved if we could just sit in a room in quiet in solitude. So you're said, like, what do you do when communication breaks down? You say sit in the room silent with the other person.
Sometimes you
That
sit in the room silently. Sometimes you just sit there with each other.
Yeah,
And then
yeah,
and sometimes you take a break and you try again, right?
yeah. That's it. So this next question is kind of stupid, and I know it's both, and it depends. But I'm curious your thought of how most people answer this for me. Are we more feeling beings or more thinking beings? I mean, you can just answer the question, but also, what do you think most people answer?
That's an interesting question. Well, I find myself thinking about images of brain scans.
Yeah.
How does the brain work, right? And given what little we understand of how the brain works, I think that the there's the reptilian brain is at the base of the hemiglia, right? It's at the very base, and then you have the social brain, the animal brain, and then what they often refer to as more the human brain on top of, like, around that. So the reptilian brain, that's where our fight flight responses come from. And we often think of it as a very kind of basic survival brain. And I don't even know if we can. It's an action brain. Um, it doesn't. It's not quite either. Feeling. It's definitely not thinking. It's not feelings the way we often think about emotions as feelings. And then there's a level to which we are reptiles, right, in our evolutionary nature, which isn't quite either thinking or feeling. And I think that both, and then the emotions and the thought process kind of comes later in our evolutionary journey. Um, and I don't know much about how, I don't want to say reptiles don't think and feel, because I don't think I know enough to know that to say one way or the other. But um, I don't know how much the two things are really separate. Like, personally, I don't know how much. And I, because my understanding and watching with sitting with people, I think we're probably slightly more feeling beings, right? Probably more on the feeling side of things, but language also shapes feelings, and feelings really, really shape language. Some of the most important words are feeling orientated, like love and trust and anger, like those are expressions. Babies express themselves emotionally, not just hunger and tired, but also like upset and happy, really early on, before they have the thoughts, before they have the language. Are they thinking when they're like 2 months old? Maybe, but by the time a baby's a few months old, they can certainly have happy smiles and, sad, upset faces, right? So feelings are really, really, really basic to humanity. And so is thinking. The Haudenosaunee Confederacy, they say humans are thinking beings, and we can work with our emotions. And like, the thinking is really important. So I don't know. I kind of want to say both. And I'm guessing most people on your podcast would either say both, or maybe lean towards feelings.
Yeah. 80% of people go, I think we're more feeling beings. but 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 it is both, and it's like we invented
Yeah.
these words, feeling and thinking, so we think we can separate them because we invented the words, but you can't
Right.
really. And that's the right answer. But Bridget Bardot says, when I make love, I don't think. And I'm like, good luck. How do you turn your brain off? Or people who meditate, they go, okay, now think about not thinking. And then
Right.
there's a
Right.
bumper sticker on a car on my street that goes, don't believe everything you think. And I'm like, well, you could say, don't believe everything you feel.
There's a massage therapist I work with, and she says, you're thinking a lot, Sarah. You should try slowing down your brain. And I glare at her. I'm like, I know you're right. Glare.
Well, here's two from Alan Turing in the 50s. One, is thinking a function of the soul?
So my first response is no. I don't think it is a function of the soul. Um, I think the soul is doing something that's in some ways bigger than that. That said, there are times when I have seen, coming from a Quaker background, when I have seen Quakers think together, when I have seen groups of people think together, and it is a soulful experience,
Yeah.
right? And it's an experience where the souls of those gathered can come into harmony through the process of the mind.
Yeah.
And I've experienced that. I've been part of that. I've been part of moments when my mind meshes with another person's mind in such powerful and poignant ways that it becomes this bridge for our souls, like the mind becomes a bridge for our souls to come together.
Yeah.
And it can be exquisite, like the mind and the thinking can enter into the sacred realm.
Yeah.
And the soul can engage with the thought and can engage with our intellectual self. I used to belong to the Quaker Institute for the Future, and we were a Quaker think tank, and we were developing a Quaker process of researching together. And that was one of our main goals, was to not only use our brains, but to invoke the spirit and to invoke that part of our wisdom, which wasn't only located in our intellectual, brainy selves, right? So and I think democracy at its best has a soulful quality to it. Like governance at its best has a soulful quality to it. And yet, in order to do so, it has to get beyond the rat. It has to get beyond that, like rah, 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 rah. It has to get beyond that kind of the not just fighting, but argument for the sake of argument. It has to get beyond being right or being wrong. It has to get into like, okay, the collective. It has to get into the bigger space.
Yeah, the word conspiracy means to breathe together. So I'm always like,
Mm,
that's what I start every talk with. Let's take a deep breath in together, or like yoga when you om with the group in yoga, or when you sing a choir, a hootenanny.
yeah, right.
Find that harmony happening. The second Turing question is, can machines think?
Can machines think? Well, again, that goes back to this question: is what is thought? Machines. One of my AI, um, one of my friends, Gray Cox, who's been working on some philosophical. He's a philosopher, and I was kind of saying, well, machines can't feel, and he says, well, actually, if you look at all the sensory things that machines can do, they sense things, but they can tell you what temperature it is. They can like do all these sensory things. Like, how much are they feeling? And it was such a provocative thought for me, because for me, part of not a machine being able to be able to think, to me, is the way humans think, means you can also is linked to feelings, because thought and emotion are connected on some level.
Yeah,
um and so, like, if machines can't feel, then I don't think they can think the way humans can think, which doesn't mean they can't have some logic to them. My One of my colleagues works a lot with AI, chat GPT and everything in her work, and she often jokes in exasperation. She's like, these chat boxes are just as difficult as working with a human. They are just as wrong, and they make just as many mistakes, and their thinking is just as poor. And I tell them 5 times to do this thing and they don't do it. It's like working with a poorly trained human. And um and they have personalities, and disagreements, and days when they show up late, and days when they're slow, and days when they're fast. And I'm like, wow, I don't know how that makes me feel, but but it is this interesting question. Like, if machines are more and more and more gathering sensory information from all these
yeah,
different sources, is it simply that they're thinking differently than humans? And I'm increasingly thinking that, we're getting to a point where machines, I think they do think, but I would not assume that they think the same ways humans think. And I
yeah,
think to assume that our thought process and that our inherent logic process is the same or could ever be the same misses something.
yeah.
It misses something.
Really well put. Thank you. Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
Yeah, again, happiness and meaning, I think, for me, are connected. I I often go for satisfaction. I derive tremendous satisfaction from doing highly meaningful work. I just finished. I'm in the process. Every year I do a lot of work around Thanksgiving and decolonizing Thanksgiving, and I do a lot of work around like the circular calendar, as I mentioned before. I derive tremendous meaning and satisfaction from doing that. My students love working with me. And yes, it makes me really, really happy when students like contact me and say, wow, that was amazing. That makes me really happy. Of course it does. But because I don't think that I can depend upon other people, I very much believe you have to do something for the thing itself, not because of the results you might get out of it. So I don't know if someone's going to like what I do. I don't know if a client's going to always appreciate working with me every single time. I mean, they usually that happens, but I don't know if they will. So for me, it's like using, like I have to focus on what is it that I can do in that, like, what's the right thing in the moment? And I answer that question. And that makes me, and like feeling I'm doing the right thing. I'm doing the thing as it ought to be done, as
Yeah.
best as I can. And there is a satisfaction to that. Sometimes it can make me happy. I don't always get the happiness.
Yeah. Well, again, that's the shifting of the words is great because you brought in the word satisfaction. Sometimes people bring in the word contentment to
Uh-huh.
replace happiness. But I got the question from Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. He says that
Amazing
happiness,
book.
yeah, he says that happiness doesn't tend to last, meaning tends to last. What do you think of that?
Mhm. Yeah, especially the way he's using it, right?
Yeah,
Like, I mean, his story of, as I'm sure your listeners know, is someone who's been in this, like, who was in a concentration camp. We can't, happiness is a very positive experience, obviously. Life, we're not in control of what life gives us a lot of the time. Like, we like to think we can think about what might come down the pipelines, but we can't control a bunch of stuff. He couldn't control being swept up into a concentration camp. That was not in his power of control.
yeah,
And like, does that mean that his experience has no meaning? Well, he chose to enable it to mean something. He took actions to enable it to
yeah,
mean something. And, you know, does that, and again, and I think this is like there's a question of what do we make things mean, which is his own question. So if someone is one of the, Quakers are a very peace oriented group of people, and we kind of say like it doesn't matter what the cause of war is. War in and of itself is meaningless. It's only going to cause destruction and violence. That's one of the arguments. Is not just that it's bad, or not just that it causes violence, but that
yeah,
it actually causes a loss of meaning.
yeah,
Life ceases to have meaning during the times of
yeah,
war and ongoing violence. The meaning of life really changes. So, um, so if you can't control what life gives you, can you control your ability to be happy? Well, maybe. I think there are, depending upon, sometimes I think people do. I think people find happiness in all sorts of different ways, but our capacity to create meaning out of it is often far greater than our capacity to create happiness out of it. So
yeah,
basically, I would, and also recognize that, I mean, like I've always impressed with this, and I think this is something Hinduism understands and like kind of works with, is that like no matter what you're doing with your life, it can be meaningful,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And it's like there's a way in which Hinduism, I think, has kind of penetrated something there that a lot of Western traditions like don't always.
Well, that you sussed out that Viktor Frankl so deep for me. It gave me new enlightenment on that whole situation he went through and what we can do about it. Does the brain more detect consciousness or create it? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're more so detecting it or more so creating it?
Hmm. Again, I want to do a both and. I think the brain is detecting consciousness
Yeah,
and I think it is creating it. Like I
yeah,
can't imagine. I mean, I think that's one of the profound religious spiritual questions. Is there consciousness outside of brains?
yeah,
Right? And I would say yes. I would say that consciousness absolutely exists outside of not just human brains, but all brains, all animal and reptilian brains. And I say that because of our increasing scientific understanding, as well as our spiritual understanding of plants and rocks and oceans and water. Like the extent to which these beings that predate us, like, have various forms of consciousness. And I have I animism is such a deep, profound truth, like that there is a consciousness. It's not my consciousness, it's a different kind of consciousness, but there is a consciousness of the waters, that the waters have,
yeah,
and that the trees have, and that plant life has. We have so much evidence, how plants respond to music and singing. It's just amazing.
yeah,
So like, there's just like our whole planet has so much intelligence in it, and everything around us has intelligence in it. It's truly like the more it just brings us to greater and greater levels of humility. About we are surrounded and we are a part of intelligence, and our intelligence is not separate from the intelligence of all the beings around us. It is a part of it, and we feed into that intelligence, and that intelligence feeds into us.
yeah. What's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
Well, I don't know. So I actually, my brain felt a little stumped by your question, so that made me want to say the speed of light. There are times when I think so fast and so many different thoughts, I would say the speed of thought is faster. And then there are times when I can barely think at all. So at least light's consistent.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And Audre Lorde said, the poet Audre Lorde said, you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Her colleague Yvonne Rainer said, oh, you can if you expose the tools.
Oh,
What new,
interesting.
yeah, what new tool do you suggest? And it doesn't have to be tangible.
Well, I think part of the trick is to not, I don't know, the word new is always helpful.
Yeah,
There's a lot of tools that are not the master's tools that we've had for a long time. So as I mentioned, I do a lot of work on circular time calendars. They are tools. They help people go into ecological and cyclical ways of thinking and being. Um, and they help us understand our place in the ecological system and our place, and help us make patterns and do pattern sensing and discernment and come to wisdom for our own lives. They're amazing. And on some level, all I'm doing is I'm taking something that's been around for like gazillions of years and we've forgotten how to work with. I didn't create it. It's always been there. I put it into a new format. I helped to take something that's always been there, that's like in some ways right in front of us every day. And like I kind of reformatted it a bit, right? But it's not like I didn't invent circular calendars. I put
yeah,
them into a format that enables modern everyday people who come from many different cultural traditions and backgrounds and ecosystems to work with them in a way that works for them.
yeah,
So it's one of the tools I work that it's one of the things that we teach the most and people love the most of some of the different things that we do at Sequoia Samanvaya. But like the circular time calendar work is phenomenal, but it's also, it's ancient and it's new. Like we're using it in a
yeah,
different way, right? In a different format. We're doing different things with it. So I often find that the ancient new stuff is where so much of the tools that are possible for dismantling the master's house exist.
yeah,
I also do think there's something about this question of, I was just at an indigenous economics conference in San Francisco at the beginning of the month, which was really, really phenomenal. And so many powerful leaders and thinkers and doers and actors. people doing incredible action in different communities um, across across the world, mostly Canada, U.S. And some folks were talking about, like the question was, are we, as Indigenous people, they were saying, are we Indigenous people trying to change the current system, um, to like use the current system to like advance our goals, and so helping the current system become a little bit more indigenous, or are we trying to create indigenous economies that are really separate from the current system? And that's actually a similar question to this, do we use do we recognize that the master's tools of, say, financial flows and
Yeah.
investments are problematic, and they have these very problematic origins, and we use them anyway to, knowing what they are, but for a different means? Do we change
Yeah.
the goal and keep the tool, right? This is within the environmental movement, this is writ large a huge question. Or do you create a new tool and a new goal?
Yeah.
And I think that, to serve a new goal. And I think that the tension between those two things, can the tool that was created from a context of harm be used, um, to enable a more healthy world to emerge? Or do you have to create a new tool to create a new consciousness? It's a really valid question. I tend to be, it depends on the tool, but I mean, I tend to like I tend to lean into complexity and not into simple answers, but I think it's a really, really important question. And I don't think it's straightforward. And I do see, I all the time we see it, right? We see people using tools and changing them for their own ends, and getting results that serve them.
Yeah. Wow, that was heavy because that word tension really resonated because McLuhan called that tension the resonating interval. It's the gap or the in betweenness between the two. Change the current system or create a new system. And then how do you navigate the tools in there? And
Mhm.
I'm curious because he learned from, like Frank Zappa, from James Joyce, that all times are happening now. That's called
Mhm.
all at onceness.
Mhm.
I'm not familiar, just in basic terms. Circular time calendar, is that similar to all at onceness, that all times are happening now, or is it different?
That's a great question. So, the way we don't use it in that way. We use the term to talk about the way in which, you can put your yearly reflection into a spiral and circular effect. And so we're just literally taking a linear calendar system and putting it into a circular and spiral process. That said, one of the most interesting things that comes up when people are doing this work with me, and just in general, when people are working with me, is they end up asking this question, that you're asking. They're asking, one way I talk about it is, how is the past and the future both alive in the present moment?
Yeah,
Right. And so the ways in which time's not only nonlinear, and but it's multidimensional. So it's neither linear nor spiraling.
yeah,
And so, like, if you think of it spatially, like I always like to think of time from the solar system's perspective. The solar system, Earth is cycling sun. That's where we get a circular calendar from. Sun is cycling in the solar system. The solar system is cycling the galaxy, right? So it's like there's these levels of cycles upon cycles and orbits upon orbits that are happening at very, very fast speeds. It's just
yeah,
mind-boggling, like, like so fast. We are circling and spiraling and into this vortex. Like, we're just going into this vortex. And and there's something about that movement. We're simultaneously going into the future, and yet the ramifications of the past are with us all the time. The past is in the present all the
yeah,
time. The future is in the present all the time. They say, all futures are here now.
yeah,
The future generations are literally in our bodies, in our seeds, and in our
yeah,
wombs, right? And
Yeah.
so there is all these ways in which time is not only nonlinear, it is multidimensional.
Yeah.
And there's different ways of engaging with that. I think in some ways that is the work of spiritual and religious traditions, is to help people engage with the multidimensionality of time. It's not what most people get in Sunday school, but it is what is the work of many mystics across many different traditions.
Wow, Sarah, you evoked this really big question I never ask anymore, but I'll just tell you about it is human progress more cyclical or more cumulative? Are we going in circles or are we getting better or worse? And the answer usually is it's a spiral. The word you brought up.
Right.
It was sometimes we're spiraling up and sometimes we're spiraling down. So that word multidimensional really
It's
helps.
I mean, I would say it is multidimensional, and like
Yeah,
it's even. I mean, I am a huge fan of spirals, right? I
yeah,
love working with spirals,
yeah,
but like what we see happening now, like for example, I was just listening to a great, fascinating podcast about some women in the religious right movements. I don't even know what they're really religious right anymore. It's like I feel like that terminology has changed recently, but I've heard women talk who are saying that that the feminist movement was a problem and that women should not be working or should not be they shouldn't be in positions of leadership, and they have all these arguments which I'm like, I don't like, how can you like even say this? But it's ridiculous. But like what I it's not just going backwards, right? Or going forwards, because
yeah,
that assumes that we know what forwards and backwards is, right?
yeah,
So whereas in reality, like her perspective, she thinks that she is moving an idea forward. In my perspective, she is moving an idea backwards. She
yeah,
is taking us backwards by like, many of my ancestors and your ancestors have fought for a very long time to
yeah,
enable women to have the rights they have today. And here's this person who happens to be a woman, or who maybe that's related, who's saying, oh, no, 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 that was a bad idea. We need to go back to what we were. Right.
yeah,
So like in both quote unquote sides, right? Both sides of this argument are using the understanding of going forward and backwards, of progress, as like the goal, but
yeah,
they are defining progress in completely different ways. And so what's actually happening is that there's this multidimensional thing, right? Whereas neither spiraling up nor spiraling down. It's it's like, oh, all these things are happening at the same time.
yeah,
At the same time. And like she feels that progress looks one way, and I feel that progress looks another way. Now I obviously think I'm
yeah,
right. But like what do we do? And like that's when we need complexity. That's
yeah,
when we need to enter
yeah,
into this linearity. We need to enter the complexity. Okay, there's probably something that she says that has some tiny bit of truth of it somewhere. Maybe I'm willing to consider that there's something there that maybe the feminist movement has really missed. Well,
yeah,
yeah, I think the feminist movement's missed some really important things. Yeah.
yeah,
And it, right, and there's some stuff that our society as a whole has missed that's really
yeah,
important. There's some stuff that's been missed. Does that mean that it's wrong? Not necessarily. Does that mean
yeah,
we could create something different? Yes.
yeah. Yeah, it's like McLuhan saying everything we invent has services and disservices, and it's how you suss it out. So
Yes.
Mallarmé, the symbolist poet, nailed what you just said so well, beautifully. He said, to define is to kill, to suggest is to create. And then Ram Dass, the Eastern philosopher, American dude who went Eastern philosophy on us, wrote the great book Be Here Now, Live in the Moment. And Wyndham Lewis,
Mhm.
this guy in England, said, I thought he nailed it the best. He said, the artist, and just like say everybody, but not be elitist, artists live in the moment and write a detailed history of the future. So
Mm,
isn't that amazing to live in the moment, that you are doing what you were just saying, and you explained circular time calendars so well to me as like your main tool. That was really articulate, and it opened up a lot.
mm.
And so now I ask the tool questions so often. Someone said, "Well, what about a toy?" So now I ask, what what toy do you gravitate? Yeah, what toy do you gravitate to? And I'm glad that the first thing you tackled was new, because usually I say, well, it doesn't have to be new, and it doesn't, it's
Mm,
more. My question is more, what tool do you gravitate towards? And you really got
right.
it.
But
And
yeah,
it doesn't have to be taking to dismantle the master's house, but I put
right,
it in those terms and see what happens. I
right.
mean, now what toy do you gravitate towards?
What toy do I gravitate towards? Uh, um, that's a great question. Um, so the first thing that comes to mind, actually, well, I guess two pieces. So one is, I don't know if this counts as a toy, but um, in-depth dialogue,
Oh
being able
yeah,
to have deep dialogue,
yes,
um, and ritual. Those. I mean, so for me, ritual is play. Is a
yeah,
playful, right? I mean, it
yeah,
can be extraordinarily serious, but it's play
yeah,
fundamentally. So that is definitely one of the things, one of the toys I gravitate towards. Working with history is actually fun for me. And so there's a certain amount of play that I experience in that.
yeah,
Um, Most of what I do, I actually experience play with. But the other thing that comes to mind is like working with fire. And what I
yeah,
mean by that is, people gathering around fire. And I've been doing new moon fire gatherings here
yeah,
locally, which has been such a delight recently. And it's kind of quite nice because it's proving to be not particularly difficult. But gathering people around fire to share myth and story and song and dance,
yeah,
like that evokes such play and such fun, and such gentleness and such ancient tech, if we would dare to use such a term as technology, which may or may not be an appropriate use of the term, but fire as an ancient, gathering around fire is ancient technology, and gathering to sing with the rivers and the waters is an ancient technology. Like those are, if we want to use words like toys, like these are places where we can play together, and different parts of ourselves emerge, right? In the flickering firelight, the shadow and the light helps us see our own faces differently.
love it. Both of those really resonate with me. What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
Well, I always like to have to make, I have to make sure that I have a glass of water by my bed.
Yeah, good.
um, it's not, it's because I get really thirsty actually. And it's really annoying to be thirsty when you're trying to go to sleep. At nighttime, what do I worry about before I go to bed? I worry about, yeah, I worry about things I can't control, such
Yeah,
as my mother is, struggling as she gets older. And I worry, and I worry about the peoples who don't have homes and don't have places to sleep at night. And I worry about, uh, where our country is going. Like, honestly,
yeah,
I'm quite worried about where our country is going right now. And I
really.
don't know if that's always been true for me. I mean, like, as someone who's always been somewhat political, right? I grew up in a family that was politically active. I don't I'm far more worried right now than I've been maybe, for many years.
Yeah.
It's not like I was like hunky dory, like, before.
No, I know exactly what you're talking about. So McLuhan learned from a poet, Ezra Pound, that artists are in the antenna of the race. They're
Mm,
broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions. So we might learn how to cope with what we don't like about our inventions.
mm.
So I asked you, Sarah, the question McLuhan probed his whole career. Why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
Yeah, because it's inconvenient,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
and like the we is really important there.
Yeah.
Like the, um, I remember it wasn't that long ago, right? It was just what, 2 years ago that the heads of, all these tech companies and AI folks went to Congress and said, you need to regulate us,
Yeah.
right? Because this is really dangerous because AI is super, super dangerous. And now they're like, actually, don't regulate us, just give us more money. You
Yeah.
know, like, like the creators of the tool said to the powers, in this case Congress,
Yeah.
that they needed regulation, and Congress doesn't act very quickly ever about much of
Yeah.
anything. So not surprisingly that people didn't, not much happened,
Yeah.
which, right, like politics aside, like unlikely that something quickly was going to happen there.
Yeah.
um and they just, and a couple, quite quickly later on, they were like, oh, never mind, it's inconvenient.
Yeah.
People want to, like, the they didn't, who is the person who gets to control what happens with the technology, right? Who is the person who gets to control what happens with the innovation? Is it the person who invents the innovation? Sometimes.
Yeah.
Is it the regulator in Congress? Sometimes. It's very rare. How often is it the end user, the everyday person? Well, not that often, right? Like, I can only do so much to control the impact of my washing machine and my dryer. There isn't a whole lot I can do.
Yeah.
Like, by the time the computer is in my house, I can control how much I use the computer, but I can't control the impact of the silicon, of like mining for silicon, and
Yeah.
like, and the amount of water that's used to create it. I can choose whether or not I buy it. But in
Yeah.
a society where my work and livelihood are dependent upon computers, how much, like, where's how much, so I think part of the challenge of this question is, who is it that's supposed to have control? Now, we like to think that
Yeah.
in democratic societies, the people have control over where the society is going, but I actually think most of the time, most of us don't feel that much of the time.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to say we don't have agency, because I think we do,
Yeah.
and collectively we have a lot of agency. But there's also this, like, that's part of, and consumer movements are really important and all that stuff. But like, there's a lot of places where I think that many, many people would actually like to change the course of innovation, of where
Yeah.
innovations are going. And there's not some for like there are some forums, there have been forums, and a lot of them have been knocked down, right?
Yeah.
Like, a lot of the constraints on industry. Okay, industry pollutes like a lot. That's part of why the EPA was developed, and now the EPA is defanged, right? So it's like it doesn't have the ability to control, and it's being led by people who don't want it to control industry anymore.
Yeah.
So, like, we actually did a fair amount to control industry and to shape how it's going.
Yeah.
And now those controls are being taken away. So I think part of it is, again, back to this political question of, like, who has what power in society.
Yeah.
And you know, I know people who aren't sure if they have power around innovation, but they're acting like they do, and that's often really important, right? That's often, like, sometimes you have to act like you have power to change the course of something in order to gain that power.
That's really good. It's like Rachel Carson, 62, changed the world forever.
Completely,
And
completely.
yeah, in a book, you know,
In a
amazing.
book. And many, many books have been written since that support her, and many
Yeah.
books have been written that people never read and don't pay any attention to. So it's like, what's the thing? We don't know. But that's where it's like, you have to follow your leading, you have to follow your calling, you have to listen and talk to a lot of people, and talk to yourself, and listen and talk to the earth and talk to God. And it's like, follow those nudges, especially when they feel hard.
Yeah. Do artists have moral obligation?
Well, I say yes. but I think to be human is to have moral obligation.
Yeah.
Um, and I have seen many artists who I think abuse their position as artists, um, and don't ask questions of consequence and don't ask questions of impact, and kind of just do whatever the hell they want, without looking at impact. And I don't question that as artists, as someone I do think of myself as an artist. I don't, so I'm not, but it's just, I would say that for anyone. I would say that for anyone who throws a party and doesn't clean up after them
Yeah.
is like, what gives you the right to throw that party?
Yeah. Wow. You've covered this, Sarah, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas? I'm
Honestly,
glad-
I'm more afraid of the old ideas. The most dangerous ideas in our times are the old ones that we thought had gone away.
yeah. We thought they went away. Yeah. You know, I'm glad you can laugh because everything we're talking about is very serious, but you have to have a sense of humor, and you do.
You have to have a sense of humor.
Yeah, yeah, and you're willing to laugh, and then I know what you're saying. Now, can you conjure up your earliest memory ever, or one of them?
So my memory goes back very, very old. And so one of my earliest memories is I was standing in my crib, playing with like the mobile, and I was using the crib to stand up. So I must have been just learning to walk. So I must have been like 10 or 11 months old.
Yeah,
Um, and yeah, and I remember it. But I think I have a lot of memories from my crib. And I think my current understanding, or like one of my understandings is that when I was a little bit older, so like 3 years old, I think I reflected back on when I was like 9 months old or 10 or 11 or 12 months old. Um, so I actually think some of my memories of my babyhood, if you would, are actually memories of memories.
yeah, memories and memories, because that's the
Yeah.
next question. Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
It's a complete blessing. However, I love this book, which you might like, by Lewis Hyde,
Yeah,
about forgetting.
yeah, I know
It's,
that.
I
Yeah,
think, a primer on forgetting. And that book has been so helpful. I talk a lot about the power of remembering and the importance of
yeah,
remembering as a embodied intellectual experience. And I have a whole course on remembering, which is essentially on the histories of colonization and climate change. Um, and and I have all these different ways of thinking about remembering and forgetting. Like, forgetting is so important.
yeah,
It's so important. And I think for me, like, as someone who talks a lot about remembering, really understanding the role of forgetting and the beautiful role of forgetting, and how forgetting is part of what enables us to live together as humans, as well as, for like, everything can go either way. Everything can tear us apart or bring us together. Our capacity to forget, as well as our capacity to remember, can be unbelievably helpful.
yeah.
Right?
Really
Forgetting
cool.
is part of what helps. So they can both be wonderful and they can both be problematic. And I highly recommend Lewis's. I mean, I recommend everything he writes because he's just such a phenomenal thinker and writer.
Yeah, it really resonates with what you just said with me because James Joyce says in Finnegan's Wake, remember to forget.
Yeah, remember to forget. Yeah.
Tell
I
me
mean, I don't
some.
think we have to work that hard, honestly,
Yeah,
because right. And yeah, they say in the old Greek mythology, when they talk, they say the soul, the spirit of the person after they die goes across the great river, um, of forgetting, the river of forgetting. And then when they come into this life, we also go through a process of forgetting what we knew before we got here. There's many, many mythologies and tales that we forget what we know before we come. And then we spend our lives remembering the echoes of it.
yeah,
Um, and we're both on a quest to remember, but most many traditions see that forgetting as a blessing. And it's
Yeah.
always interesting to me. It's almost always the forgetting that comes in that we may experience when we come into this world. And I know I also know people who have strong memories of before they came into this world. I don't want to say that's the only way of
Yeah.
experiencing this, but the memories of, to that extent that people forget when they're born, where they come from before we get here and where we go after we die. So often that is seen as helpful to being human. I just find that so interesting. Like, huh?
Yeah.
Like so many myths, they don't. It's not said as a problem.
Yeah. Tell me someone within your immediate family who had an impact on you, and what specifically was that impact?
I mean, everyone's had an impact on me and my immediate family. That's part of what it means to be in an immediate family. Um, so um, my mother taught me so much about loving ritual, or I mean, without ever calling it that or naming it that. But my parents spent the first year of their marriage in Sweden, and they were not Swedish. They were studying abroad, and they met a very close family friend named Janet. And when they came back to America, they were just there for a year. I mean, I've lived overseas for like a good 7 or 8 years of my life, so a year to me isn't a long time. Um, so they came back, and my parent and they lived in Chicago, and they moved back to California, and for various reasons, kind of by a little bit of chance, their friend Janet from Sweden, who they met in Sweden, who's also American, moved back to California with them. They all kind of lived in a similar area, and they started doing this. It's the season of Thanksgiving. I've been thinking about this. They started doing what they called, the day after Thanksgiving friend gathering. They didn't Friendsgiving wasn't a term, and they did it very quickly after they moved to California. And what it meant is that because they both got kind of fed up with their own families, and so after Thanksgiving, they would have a no family allowed friend party, and everyone would bring, all their friends would come over, and they would bring leftovers, and they would bring stories, and they would complain about their families. Or like whatever happened on Thanksgiving to each other. At least that's the story my mom would tell. I think people just had a great time together eating food and having a chance to get rid of leftovers. But what happened through that is that my parents developed a friend family, a sense of family that is an extended group of friends.
Yeah.
And I grew up with a friend family, and it turns out that my father also, his parents, not specifically around Thanksgiving, but some other stuff, his parents also had a very strong friend family. Some of them were Quaker, some of them were not, but the sense of an extended family that I grew up with a very strong sense. And so Janet, she still remains like an auntie to me.
Yeah.
And she still remains a very important person in my life. And now, as my mother is getting older and struggling more, like Janet has much better health than my mom does. And, Janet's one of the people I call upon for help. And she's not blood relative, but I have an extended friend family because my parents put that in motion before I was born. I have an extended friend family that I can draw on now as an adult, and it gave me the example of having my own friend family. So with my partner, we also have our own friend family as well as family, and we spend time with both. And but that understanding that being human is creating community beyond the immediate, beyond your immediate family or your immediate religious group, and continuously inviting people over for the meal, continuously inviting people over again and again to create, like, we didn't call it chosen family really, but to create these, you know, years upon years upon years. Like I have two childhood friends, and I think it's because I had this modeled for me. I have two childhood friends, and I'm an only child, who are like, they are an active part of my life in my 40s. It's like, that's rare in
Yeah.
America. There's not that many people who have childhood friends who they were friends with when they were 5.
Yeah.
And like, by friends, I mean, like, they will take me in if I need help. They will help me make decisions. They will show up for me and for my mom, and they will show up for my partner, like, and I show up for them. And like, and I also have, all sorts of other people, but I think that my ability to cultivate community in my business, my ability to cultivate um like meaningful relationships, is, it's not to say I don't have fights, and not to say I don't struggle with sometimes with friends and everything. I'm not sure, me too, but um the understanding of the importance of inviting people in, and then keeping them, even when it's not always easy, I think I got from both my parents.
Yeah, Sarah, that was good because you answer the questions like I really need is you take it a little deeper and you just don't answer
Mhm.
the surface answer. And in this case, you have ESP because the next question was tell me someone outside your immediate family had an impact on you and what was that impact? And in the midst of telling me your mom and dad, told me Janet and your two
Yeah, yeah,
best
yeah.
friends, but did your parents raise you a particular religion?
Yeah, they raised me Quaker.
Yeah.
It's very important. My father's family's Quaker. My mother converted to Quakerism. She was born in a Methodist tradition, and she was quite happily converted to Quakerism. And so they raised me in the Quaker tradition. I am Quaker with a very strong animist leaning, and I do a lot of things that a lot of ritual stuff is a lot of. I actually know lots of Quakers who create rituals, but I think of like Quaker Plus. I have a bunch of
Yeah.
dynamics that are more than what most Quakers do. And I'm no longer as involved with this religious society of friends. But I was telling someone recently that there was a moment a couple years ago when I was like, okay, I guess I'm just not Quaker anymore because I'm not practicing. I'm not going to meeting, and it's all about practice. And it was around that time that I got a workshop proposal that I had submitted several years earlier, got accepted at a Quaker retreat center in California. And I'm like, oh, well, it was kind of ironic. Okay. So now I guess I am still engaging with this community. But the workshop was called If Quakers Were Witches, and it's still going. Like, we still have these workshops. We're gonna have another one soon. And people love them, and they so there you go. I don't know.
Very,
I don't know. Life
very
is
good.
funny.
So, Sarah, do you pray?
I do. I do. I have a very regular prayer practice.
If God exists, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
um I mean, that's such a projection, right? What is it that we want to say to ourselves, or what do we want to hear? What is
Yeah.
it that I most want to hear from the universe, or from some figure?
Yeah.
Um, I I don't like. I mean, the first thing is, it feels a bit flippant, really. Is like, good job, well done. Okay,
Yeah.
maybe as we carry on, I don't know, but I think that on a deeper level, I um I think it's something. I'm wondering if it might be something that's a little bit closer to welcome home.
Yeah. That is the two answers I get the most are you did a good job and welcome home.
Mm.
Do evil people exist or does evil use people as a vehicle?
So I'm always intrigued with this question. Are some people born bad, right? Or
Yeah.
born evil? I'm always
Yeah.
this question really intrigues me, because in the remembering course that I teach, I talk about, as in some ways it's about theodicy, which is to say the study of evil. Colonize To look into the histories of colonization, and to look into the histories of our country, is to look into these big questions of evil. And that includes, does evil exist as a thing? Can we talk about evil as existing? Theodicy, sometimes we frame it to be like, why do good people do bad things? That's one
Yeah.
framing. And why do good people or why do people do things that cause suffering when they don't have to? Unnecessary suffering. So not just regular suffering, but unnecessary suffering.
Yeah.
Um, and I find this question of, are there people who are born bad? So I used to be a staunch no on that.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as, how can you hold any child, any baby in your arms and look at that baby and think that any child, any baby could ever be bad, right? That's just ridiculous. That's just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous, right? That's impossible. Um, and and as I've kind of seen more and talked to more people and looked at more things, um, I have come to have that there are different people with their brains are wired differently.
Yeah.
And as I come to understand the diversity of brains out there, and I'm neurodivergent, and I come to understand the diversity of brains, I have come to believe or to see again and again, I don't even know if this is a belief, but to understand the huge diversity of expression of humanity that evolution and God endow us with. It's just incredible. The
Yeah.
diversity of brains, the diversity, and if I look at it from a scientific evolutionary perspective, like, it's it makes sense because humans are some of the most adaptable animals on the planet.
Yeah.
So, how do you adapt? How do you create a creature that's so adaptable? Well, they have to have a huge amount of diversity.
Yeah.
And maybe what we now think of as like quote unquote evil people who might have more evilness, which is usually associated with they just don't feel, they either like the pain of other people, right? Or they don't care, apathetic to other humans' emotional experiences, right? Those are usually the two things that people are talking about with evil people. They People they really like feeling other people's pain. It just gives them joy. Not and I don't think, by the way, I think you can have people who like it and choose not to act on that because they don't want to cause pain. But for whatever reason, like kind of more abstractly. But what I'm trying to get to is that I think that there may be part of what's going on and part of why we are vexed by this question is because there's just this huge, we just have a huge diversity of humans.
Yeah.
And some of what one culture calls evil, another culture doesn't. What one culture
Yeah.
calls, falling, and like the book, Spirit Catches You and You Fall Down is a phenomenal example of that for epilepsy. What one culture calls like a medical condition, another culture calls a spiritual gift,
Yeah.
and another culture calls evil.
Yeah.
Right? Like all three things have been called by different things by different cultures. And so I sometimes wonder how much of this is really about, diversity. And that's not an excuse.
Yeah.
That's not an excuse for taking actions and for creating systems and institutions.
Yeah.
And Walter Wink, of course, is so phenomenal within the Christian tradition of thinking about some of this stuff. But creating institutions in which um, evil is perpetuated
Yeah.
and harm is perpetuated and it becomes endemic to the system. So
Wow.
I almost always look towards what's the institutional structure that enables quote unquote evil to keep happening,
Yeah.
as well as individual human characteristics. And sometimes I recently heard an example of someone who I otherwise would think of as a very lovely person who did something that was genuinely not okay.
Yeah.
Um, and they admitted they did it out of spite.
Yeah.
And um, they knew it wasn't okay. They did it anyway. They did it out of spite. And I was like, what's going on in that person's interiority, in their interior self?
is not, it's actually like, ooh, they're suffering.
Yeah.
They're suffering right now. Like there is something inside of them that really hurts that they're acting in this way.
Yeah.
And they're acting in a way that's not aligned with their values at all. So there's something inside of them that really hurts right now. And
Yeah.
and I asked them about that and they said yes. Yeah, like they were hurting inside. Now, does that excuse their actions? No. What
No.
they
Yeah.
doesn't, but like it's we humans can be spiteful, or humans can do, part of
Yeah.
being, I think part of being human is understanding how awful we can be, and
Yeah.
then working with that awfulness instead of pretending it doesn't exist.
Really working with it. And, a lot of people, when I ask that question about evil, they go, well, we're all capable of evil.
Mm-hmm.
And, and I like that. And the other thing you talked about is my nephew was diagnosed or whatever, autistic or special needs. And now he teaches people in college how to teach people who have special needs, but he's still special
Amazing.
needs. And his
Right.
sister nailed it one day. She goes, Mike isn't special needs, he's special abilities. So it's just the
Mm-hmm.
wording, but it is, institutional structures, diversity, all those words really helped suss this out, a bigger picture. The follow up, Sarah, the question to follow up is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And I'll set it up. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola
Mm.
stole from The Mob and the Samurai. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of
Mhm.
thoughts. The basic question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
There's a truth to that, right? I think there is a truth to that. There's a
Yeah,
truth to that. But I think you gotta like break it down a little bit. Of course, like, when is someone an enemy and when are they just making you upset and you have to deal with yourself?
yeah,
For a long time, I never thought I had any enemies. That isn't how I see the world, and that isn't how I needed to see the world. And then there came a time when there was something showed up and it's like, oh, I want this person feels something that resembles an enemy. Um, and it was very surprising to me. um, because the whole language felt weird to me and bizarre and awkward and like, like just just weird. And then someone, yeah, as I said, there was an experience. I'm like, oh, huh. And we are diametrically opposed, and we have very different ways of seeing the world. And um, what this person wants and what I want are not only not conducive, but um, opposite to each other. And like I think this person actually is taking a series of actions that would to purposely harm um, people I care about. Um, and so I think one part of that acknowledgement of the enemy, or not acknowledging the enemy, is like also recognizing we're all, part of the oneness, and looking at ourselves, right? If you point one finger forward, you point three fingers backwards. I think that's really true. And like,
yeah,
how much can you look at yourself? How much can you look at your own actions, and how much are you contributing to the situation? It's like really important, and something that I wish all of our politicians would consider more substantially.
yeah,
Um, and the enemization and the demonization of other people, especially across political lines, is so problematic. Um, and so I do find that it really, there's a lot of context specificity, um, but asking the question, what's real and what's not real, and then what can you circumnavigate?
yeah,
What can you help make not happen?
yeah,
And are there ways you can serve the greater good? How can you create situations and contexts that enable the greater good for everyone.
Yeah.
And, like people who we might really, 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 really dislike. Oh no, this is, and like really strongly. I'm thinking of as a situation of us, an old friend of mine who, like, in a situation with his ex really treated their kids in really like kind of not so great ways. And it was very important that they have a relationship. He wanted his ex-wife and his kids to have a relationship.
Yeah.
Even though a lot of the ways that she was treating them was emotionally painful for him to watch.
Yeah.
And so like he chose to, maintain relationality, even though he saw something that he didn't feel comfortable with. And the kids, to their credit, grew up to they understood their mom. They understood it. They saw it. They got it, and they had a relationship with her, and they had a relationship with him. So like there are a number of times when like, how can you create the context that's good for everyone,
Amazing.
including yourself, is like often requires us to think in ways that are bigger and more expansive and more inclusive and more diverse, I would even say, than the simplistic, oh, they should just go away, the
Yeah.
banish solution. Now, sometimes banishment, I'm not saying you should never allow, sometimes you
Yeah.
have to leave, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to leave a context. That's necessary sometimes. Unfortunately, many people listening probably have at least some ability to occasionally leave. But leaving isn't always a solution.
You put that in such good words, because I know that exact situation where one of the parents is a no good, Nick, and you shouldn't demonize the parent in front of the kids. Let
Unhelpful.
Yeah, unhelpful. And is the way your wording is so, it is really down to earth, and I can understand it and I appreciate it. Now, Sarah, I asked for 90 minutes. We're at 90 minutes. Two questions. One is, I'd love to do a part two. It could be like 5-6 months down the line, because we only got to 12 questions. I
No.
usually do. But I loved every minute of it. I mean, I know these are working when I tear up or they teared up. And
No.
when we were going right after the circular time calendar, I was crying, and I was
Oh,
like, what is going on? It was hitting me so
mm,
emotionally, because I was having these feelings like, this is where I really want these kind of situations to go, where I can learn a lot, but I could hear a little deeper delve. It's deep sea
mhm.
dive. So I appreciate this. And I thought, if we could,
I'm a deep sea person. That's what I do, is I go deep sea.
the McLuhan line is great. Message from deep sea diver to the ship. They got one of
Yeah.
those, and he says, the ship says, surface at once, ship is sinking.
Uh,
Like, so could we do one more, and then we can
sure.
okay.
Sure.
So Nassim Taleb said, games were created to give non-heroes the illusion of winning. In real life, you don't know who really wins or loses, but you can tell who a hero is. My friend said, well, villains don't think they're bad, they want control. Heroes want freedom. And then Gregory Bateson says, when the criminal gets caught, does he go, whoa, my criminal skills weren't up to snuff that day? Or, yeah, or does he go, oh, I did something morally and socially wrong? So there's a lot of prompts there. You can go wherever you want. The kind of basic question is, does punishment work?
Oh, does punishment work? Hmm. I remember as a kid, and this definitely tells you something about my family, that that my I don't right. So I did something I wasn't supposed to do, and like all parents, my parents were trying to figure out how to, what to do. And I think they had two forms of punishment. One form of punishment was that I had to have alone time in my room.
Yeah.
But one time it was particularly bad, whatever, and they took away my crayons. And this was very serious, right?
Yeah.
This was this very serious punishment in my household. It was not okay. And I remember I was so upset at them taking away my crayons. I couldn't believe that they would be so awful as parents as to take away my crayons. I remember my crayons being on top of the television set, and I would just stare at them and try to get them. I have no memory of what I was being punished for. And I'm not saying like now as an adult, like would I say that they were doing the wrong thing? I don't even know that I would say that. But you know, I I um I've worked in as a chaplain. I've worked in prisons and I've worked in jails. Particularly, I was on Rikers Island as doing my chaplaincy work internship there. I haven't done it for a huge amount of time, and I have such respect for everyone who does work inside, and it's just amazing, powerful work, and hard, really, really hard. And there are moments when I didn't think anyone should be inside, when like I'm like, wow, this is just so fucked up. This is so, and it's not good for the prison guards, and it's not good for the prisoners. Like everyone suffers.
Yeah.
Everyone suffers. Like I was surprised to learn, and I had really good teachers, the extent to which the prison guards were part of the people I were giving ministry to. It just shocked me because how hard it was for them and
Yeah.
how they were forced into positions that they never wanted to be in.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, this is so demeaning of their intelligence. And some of them would just exasperate, and they would say, like, like it's like babysitting. I mean, it's not babysitting, but sometimes I could see why they said that, and they weren't saying that, officially, right? But I could understand why they would say that, and it's because it's so demeaning, and like you don't, and like again, given that as a Quaker, I can tell you that Quakers were one of the ones who came up with the idea of prisons instead of torture, because in the medieval England, right, like torture was the primary way of, the idea was, you would stick people, like that famous image that in the medieval ages, you put someone in the rack, and they get tomatoes thrown at them, right?
Yeah.
For by the passerbys for whatever, stealing a loaf of bread or something. And so the Quakers were like, no, 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 this is not a nice thing to do. This is not helpful. This is not respecting that of God and everyone. If you give people time alone, and a cell, they were looking at like monastic cells was where that comes from, to just be in quiet together by themselves, they will come to reflect on their own, what they did wrong, and they will change themselves, and God will help change them. Right. And so it kind of comes from this really interesting religious space. And I have to say, like, okay, time for self-reflection sounds significantly better than being tortured, as a form of trying to help people, quote unquote, improve. But none of that is looking at, well, why are people stealing bread? Well, they're probably stealing bread because they're hungry. Or why are people like getting involved with drugs? Well, they're probably getting involved with drugs because they don't have a lot of other options.
Yeah.
There's this, so many crimes. I'm not saying every crime, but so many crimes is a result of circumstance and structure.
Yeah.
And that, oh, right, people they're not doing this because, are they bad? Or did they not have a lot of good options?
Yeah.
Right? And can we deal with the larger structure? And then sometimes people do things that are wrong, or do things that are bad. Well, how can we create a restorative justice system, transformational justice system, that
Yeah.
enables people to recognize the harm that they've done, to take to make amends or to do things better or to learn whatever it is and to change behavior so it doesn't happen again. And that includes how do you change the structures and the authority figure and sometimes the authority figures to enable them to like um, create less conditions for those harms to occur. Right.
Yeah.
So I think there is probably a place for punishment. I don't want to say that there's no place for punishment. I think there probably is a place for punishment in society. But so often the systems of punishment that we have put out there do not help. They don't help anybody. They don't help the community. They don't help society. They don't help, stop violent crime. They actually make things a lot worse more often than not. So again, none of there is, and that isn't to say that I mean, of course, none of the, and sometimes we need to, there are some times where we need to put people away so that they can, to protect others.
Yeah.
Sometimes away is the only way to protect.
Yeah.
And that's tricky. That's a tricky, when do you
Very
do that?
tricky. You covered it, so you're comprehensivist. You're a pattern recognizer, and you get the big picture, comprehensive awareness, and I appreciate that, because what came up in my mind was immediately what I've asked since ICE came about. Who are these guys, and why are they signing up to do this? And aren't they turning? And my friends go, no, they're mercenaries and they need money. But
Yes.
I mean, there's got to be some flip, somewhere along the line. Their conscious is going to hit them. I can't believe that their conscious isn't getting to them.
Well, we don't know that they aren't staying awake at night, troubled by what they're doing, but we should, I know many people who, and I don't want to, this isn't a direct comparison, but there's so many people who, the number of stupid shit that people will do.
Yeah.
Because they need to put money on their table. They need
Yeah.
to put dinner on their table. They need to get their kids health care. They need to,
Yeah.
whatever the thing is, right? And most of these folks are not particularly, like, they don't necessarily have education. They don't necessarily have options.
Yeah.
Right? They don't, and some of them have grown up on a lot of rhetoric and ideas. I don't think all of them, but some of them have grown up with a lot of ideas of it's a good and bad world, and the good guys, beat the bad guys. And like in this good versus evil world, they think that if the government's hiring them, they get to be the good guys.
Yeah.
And beat people up, right? And it's like, well, that they were raised on a video game. I mean, many people are raised on video games, never go into that space. But I know lots of great video gamers out there. So, but
that's
just right, like if you have a simple story about how the world works, and then the president says these are the bad guys, can you oh, well, we should go after the bad guys, right? Because they're bad, right?
Yeah.
It's yeah, and it ignores 20 gazillion things about what's actually the case and who these people actually are. But I people do a lot of stupid shit.
Yeah.
Because they need to send their kids to the doctor.
Yeah. Well, there's so many directions we can go. Causality is a big thing. Effects precede causes is a phrase that I'd love to delve deeper in with you, and many other things. So, Sara, thank you so much for your time and energy. This has truly been enlightening, and I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much. And I hope you and everyone who's listening is doing well.
Thanks, Sara. I'm going to hit the end broadcast button now, and I hope this never ends and we can keep talking forever and ever.
Talk to you later.
Okay, thanks.